Okay, this is chapter 23 of my novel Time Not Here. We're doing a guided readout. I'm posting the entire novel on YouTube and Facebook, reading it from start to finish. It's taking a lot of energy to read this story out. It's very personal to me, it's very heavy. Here we go, chapter 23. Daniel sits patiently in a cafe on Glastonbury's High Street, wondering what serenity looks like in person. He tries not to think about it, instead focusing his attention on the myriad of advertisements strewn about the place. Defeat erectile dysfunction, reads one. How, one might ask? Dick pills. Feeling old and lonely? Call this number, invites another. How can we live in a world where elderly men could possibly feel lonely? Where are his children? Why is he not playing with grandkids and sharing tales of his youth and the lessons he's learned from this roller coaster of life? Why is he left to rot in dreary retirement homes staffed by sociopathic nurses and visited but once a year by the very people he'd poured his soul into, trying to give a better shot at life than he had received? And the poor bastard can't even get an erection anymore without tricking his body with pills. Whatever Daniel's next move is to be, he knows that anything which takes him further from that as an endpoint in life is a good step to make. He refocuses on his breath and spends a few moments feeling the weight of his body pushing down on the chair beneath him. He feels the sturdy hold of the frame, the cold of the metal seeping into his buttocks, the chilly breeze whipping past his ankles as the invisible digital doorman pulls open the sliding doors for each new traveler's arrival. And then, striding in with relaxed yet upright posture, dressed in an elegant black skirt with heels and a maroon jacket covering what appears to be a slim and shapely physique, a stunning red-haired woman arrives. She locks eyes with him, smiling nervously. He smiles a slow and confident smile, then stands and walks towards her. Hello, Serenity. Hello, Daniel. It's good to finally meet you. You too. Shall I give you a tour of Glastonbury? Absolutely. She takes his hand, turns and leads him out of the coffee shop onto the street. He watches her hips as she goes. They walk from the cafe down the length of the high street. Serenity points out the spots of interest, including the Tor, a large hill protruding from the landscape with a small stone chapel at its peak. Her favorite coffee shops and the place she buys her crochet wool. Daniel gazes upon the quaint English town, full of Tudor architecture, medieval history, and modern-day monkeys in shoes that inhabit the place, seemingly unaware of the insignificance of their few decades-long blip in this town's 1,000-year timeline. They are just like people anywhere else, staring into their phones while they walk, hurrying to get to their super-important next meeting, making eye contact with as few people as possible and for as brief a moment as possible. Daniel insists that they walk slower than she wants to. She wants to walk multiple strides per second, the pace of a typical high street pedestrian. Daniel sets the pace at barely 1 stride per second. We're not in a rush, he explains. We're not late for a meeting, or soon to miss a train. We're just walking. We'll get to where we're going at the time that we get there. But for now, we're right here. Walking. But it's so slow, she laughed. Look, see that baby in the pram. Look how happy she is. Now, see that building over there. Those beams are hundreds of years old. The person that made those beams would have thought we were magicians if we showed them a smartphone. But I couldn't make a wooden beam like that. He sees the world differently to her, differently to anyone she knows. She points out the abbey, now a series of ruins scattered around a well-kept garden. Daniel stares at the structure. King Henry VIII had ordered the destruction of this and countless other abbeys across the country during his reformation of the church. A simple plunder and loot job, masquerading as religious progressivism. Here it stands 1,000 years after its construction, holding whispers of the people who built it, engraved it with symbols and faces that contained intense meaning to someone, deemed so important that they deserved immortalizing into stone. Wealth purchases a 6-bedroom country house, he muses to himself, but immortality is only born out of the inspiration you give the world through your work. "Are you finished?" she asks, starting to lose patience with his tempo. Daniel smiles at her. "You wanted to give me the tour of the town. I'm just taking it all in. Now, where would you like to eat?" They decide on a Japanese restaurant for their first meal together, and despite the order coming out wrong multiple times, they had a great time. Serenity's grace impresses him. When her dish is cold on arrival, she politely calls the waiter over and tells him the issue before letting him take the lead and bring her a new piping hot version. She thanks him and gets back to eating. No anger, no talking down to the man. As a server himself, this is a significant moment for Daniel. After the meal, they make their way to her house. It's an old administrative building, later converted into a 5-bedroom house. It had been purchased by a successful house hunter. Finding luxury homes for wealthy Russian, American, and Chinese investors had earned him enough to own one himself. As a film lover, he had installed a cinema room on the first floor, which is where, Daniel decides when he sees it, Serenity and he will share their first kiss. Her room is messy. Daniel's was worse at that age, but having lived the last few weeks in a clean and tidy living space, this room reminded him of university. A Barbie pillow rests on the unmade bed, which makes him smile and turn to interrupt her house tour. "Barbie? Yeah, what's wrong with that?" "Well, on the phone you said that you were a feminist and don't believe in gender stereotypes, yet here is Barbie, the epitome of female stereotypes, resting on your bed for you to cuddle with. I find it interesting." She looks confused. "I've had that for years. It doesn't mean anything. It's just one of those things that you keep from your childhood." He thought of his monkey toy, with the torn arm and faulty voice box. He knows that all things contain meaning, whether we know the meaning or not. The music we listen to, the art we hang on the walls, the clothes we wear, all of it speaks volumes about who we are, what we think and what our origin is. It represents who we are inside. He walks over to her chest of drawers, made of solid pine and of the quality he'd come to expect from the tasteful landlord. Sat amidst the bottles of perfume and old birthday cards is a small circular badge that reads, "Gay Icon." Daniel laughs as he picks it up. "Let me guess. Peaches?" Serenity looks uncomfortable. "I know what you're going to say, but she just got me that as a joke, that's all." "If you say so." He takes a deep breath and finds her DVD collection. "Shall we watch Hot Fuzz?" She laughs. "Sure." The film is a silly English comedy about a high-flying inner-city police officer who's so impressive in his arrest numbers, crime reduction, and detective work that he has outshined his department and is forcibly transferred to a quiet country village. Drug lords and gang violence is replaced with missing swans and angry neighbors jostling for fence positioning. "They filmed this in Wells, you know. That's just up the road from here," Serenity points out as the protagonist arrives in the village, his own version of hell. Full of awkward British humour, references to successful action movies and tongue-in-cheek banter, it's a film that Daniel had always loved. As he watches, though, he can't help but see the deeper meaning, hidden amongst the jokes. The challenges of being a high performer, surrounded by people that seek to diminish your accomplishments to hide their own insecurities. The difficult but necessary task of toning down the intensity of your output to leave time for appreciating the world around you. Whether or not the filmmakers wanted to communicate this is unimportant. This is his meaning. Having seen the film many times, neither of them are engaged in the story, despite the huge 6-feet-wide projector screen and surround sound built specifically for immersion. No, they are focused on something far more intoxicating, far more immediate, far more real. Daniel watches Serenity's blouse rise and fall with each short breath she takes, wondering what lay beneath. He can smell her perfume in the air and a faint hint of the coconut shampoo she must have used today. She puts on her glasses, which do the usual trick of making her seem even more intelligent. He sat apart from her, not touching at all, but under the same large blanket. He had decided as far back as the restaurant that he wants their first kiss to be as intimate and intense as possible. The more he attempts to grope her in the lead-up, the less power it will hold. So he sits, breathing, wondering when the time will come. She lets out a little sigh and repositions, angling her legs towards him slightly. He turns his head and moves closer. His face is inches from hers. still facing the screen. Patiently, he stays, watching her nostrils flare as she breathes, noticing the color change in her cheeks as the chemistry of the moment builds. Her eyes blink a few times, her breath quickens. She turns her head slightly and glances at him nervously before looking ahead again. He can feel the blood flowing to his groin. His heartbeat quickens. Everything in his body is begging him to make a move. She lifts her right arm and moves her hair behind her ear. Her cheeks turn a bright red. Daniel looks down to see her now exposed neck. He takes a slow breath in through his nose. Her skin is beautiful, soft and pale. He wonders what it feels like to stroke. She lowers her arm to her leg. He feels a gentle flow of air coming from her arm's movement. It came from her armpits, and it was not deodorant. The smell of her, unfiltered by expensive perfumes or fancy name deodorants. The smell of her. It was intoxicating. He can't explain it. Something about that scent lights a fire in his chest. He moves his head around directly in front of hers. He takes another slow, deep breath, kissing her on the lips. He pulls back, just a millimeter or so, waiting for her. She leans in and kisses him back. Her tongue meets his own. They dance together, as if they've been waiting for each other for far too long. "Let's go to your room," Daniel says. Not a very long chapter, that, just 12 minutes, eh?